we probably do something like 70% of the work we do is off-grid systems completely. We do a bit of commercial rooftop solar, and we do hybrid systems or grid-connect battery storage systems. Look, I've been in the solar industry a bit over 2 years, and I've had a bit of experience with residential solar, commercial solar, and battery storage systems. And just a little bit of background on Offgrid Energy. We were formed in 2011 over in South Australia, so our head office in Adelaide. But we do installations all over Australia. We've got installations in every state, and a few international projects that we've delivered as well. You want to click on that? Okay, we'll try again. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the different types of systems there are out there, off-grid systems versus hybrid systems, and show you some examples of those. So I'm going to talk about new battery products that are on the market. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the government incentives that are in place at the moment. I'm going to talk a little bit about battery ready and what that actually means. There's a few different interpretations of what that could actually mean. I'm going to talk a little bit about the economics of hybrid or grid battery systems. Talk about some of the troubleshooting and problems that we've come across in our travels, and show you some examples of some different system options. Got quite a few photos there that I can share with you. Yep. So, off-grid. This is a little bit hard to read, but what this is a load profile. And with an off-grid battery system, what we would do is look at a detailed list of all the appliances that you're going to use in the house, look at how many hours a day they're going to be used, how many days a week, and look at what power ratings they have. And we use the information that comes out of that spreadsheet to base a system design upon. So off-grid is quite detailed, and it's pretty critical. If you get it wrong, it could mean that the person that's got the system might end up having times without power or downtime, which can be quite stressful both for the customer and the person trying to solve that problem. So you want to make sure you get off-grid system designs correct. That's a photo of a typical off-grid system design with sealed gel lead acid batteries. One of the products that we use a lot is a battery inverter, which is made in Melbourne here. It's a great inverter for both off-grid and grid-connect systems. In this case, it's paired with a Fronius solar inverter, which many of you might be familiar with. And that's a complete off-grid system with a generator attached. Yeah, go. What we're starting to see, though, is a lot more lithium battery products coming onto the market. And this is an example, similar system, but instead of a lead acid battery bank, it's got a lithium type battery. The brand's called BYD. It's one that we use in both off-grid and grid-connect applications. Yeah, keep going. Off-grid solar is a little bit different to grid-connect solar. In off-grid scenarios, quite often you're trying to optimize the solar to maximize winter production, whereas you are on a grid-connect scenario, it's probably more about maximizing production over the course of the year, or potentially matching it to your consumption profile. But with off-grid solar, we're really trying to get the pitch of the panels up quite steeply to maximise the low winter sun angle and minimise generator runtime. The other thing I was going to say was people have questions as we go along. Feel free to shout out, and I'll try and keep it fairly casual and answer them as we go if I can. The other important part of the off-grid system is a diesel generator, and we recommend having a good quality generator in all our off-grid systems if possible. Normally set up with an automatic start, and it does two things. It improves the reliability of the system. If you do have a failure with some part of your off-grid system, you can always use the generator there as a backup, and you do have a power source. The other thing it does is it means that you don't need to put as much battery storage and solar in, so it can actually save you a bit of money by including a generator to get you through some of those low solar days during winter. Yeah. So I guess the hybrid systems are a little bit different, and often we find people get the terminology a little bit mixed up. So when I talk about off-grid systems, I'm talking about people normally that are located at a fair distance from the nearest power pole. Quite often they're building a house and they might be looking at $30,000 or $50,000 or sometimes more than $100,000 to bring power onto site. So they're putting in an off-grid system that doesn't have any connection to that mains power grid. With hybrid systems or grid-connect battery systems, normally you, rather than having a generator there, you get a grid connection, put in a battery and some solar, and really you're using the battery to capture excess solar that you're not using during the day, so you can use it at night rather than exporting it back into the grid, and that helps you to reduce the amount of electricity that you're using at night. So in this case, most of you are probably familiar with the Tesla Powerwall 2. So one of the installations we've done with a couple of solar inverters next to it there. This is the Electrotechnology system, again with LGM batteries in a grid-connect configuration. Looks pretty much like an off-grid system. This is another one with BYD batteries in a hybrid grid-connect scenario as well. Just a few examples to show you. Now, there's a lot of new products on the market. If you had a look, there's probably something like 40 different battery products that have come into the market in the last 3 or 4 years. A lot of them are lithium-based batteries, and most of them in this picture are, I'd say the majority that are available on the market at the moment are lithium, particularly those that are directed at grid-connect battery systems. And look, there are quite a range of other new technologies and old technologies that are available. But what we're seeing, the majority of installations going in for grid-connect batteries are with some type of lithium battery. Even within the lithium chemistry, there are different chemistry setups. Most of the batteries on here are lithium or LFP, lithium ferrophosphate batteries. And a couple on there, the Tesla and the LG, are what they call NMC lithium. So nickel, manganese, cobalt, so slightly different setup there. There is this one down the bottom here too, which is a different technology, the red flow Zedcell battery that some of you might have heard of. They're a bit of a different technology. They're a flow battery, zinc bromide, and yeah, we've installed a few of the batteries on this screen, but they come in different shapes and sizes. I just wanted to give you a bit of a snapshot of what they look like. No, we haven't. We haven't. We thought, I guess our position probably over 5 years is that we've tried out a lot of different battery technologies. And I think at one stage we were installing a different system nearly every week, and you've got to learn the specifics of that battery, the intricacies of how you program and set up the settings, firmware upgrades and stuff like that. There are a lot of things that you can potentially end up troubleshooting. And probably about 18 months ago, we said, right, we need to streamline things a little bit. And basically we made a decision to let go of some of the batteries that we're doing and narrow it down. And now we do probably a range of 2 or 3 different batteries. But yeah, the supercapacitor batteries or lithium titanate batteries that I think you're referring to. Yeah, they're like a supercapacitor, I think they've been marketed as. I guess I think the jury's still out on them. I know there's some people putting a few of those in, but I think some of the projections about life expectancy on them were like 1,000 times better than anything else on the market. They seemed a little bit over-eager, I think, or yeah. They were talking about a million cycles or something, which was, yeah, I think when something sounds too good to be true, quite often it is, and our position, I guess, has been to just maybe sit back and see how they go. Yeah, I'll talk a little bit more about some of the risks involved with some of the battery storage stuff in a minute, which might refer to that. The Zedcell, we installed Zedcell batteries actually. We've probably got a handful of systems out there, and they do have some quite good characteristics in terms of really high heat tolerance, theoretical unlimited life cycle, but the cost is quite high. There are some downsides to it as well, like the battery needs to shut down once a week to do a maintenance cycle. So if you're using it in off-grid and you've only got one battery and it's got to shut down once a week, you know, you lost your power supply. I'm not sure about how long it is, but it's a few hours, I think, at least. So we were finding these Zedcell systems that had multiple batteries in it. You know, it's a smaller percentage of the total storage that's shutting down doing that. I think even Zedcell have said that their focus is on larger telecommunication sites in Asia. So I think they realise they're struggling to compete on price with some of the other products that are on here in the residential spectrum. You might have heard that there are some rebates available. First of all, there's solar rebates available in Victoria, which are $2,225. And you can get a matching no-interest loan for the solar component of the job. If you're in one of the lucky 20 or so postcodes in Victoria that have been designated by the state government, there is a battery rebate available as well, nearly $5,000. They haven't been flying out the door as fast as the solar rebates, despite being double the value. And I think it's probably because Gird-connect battery storage, the economics of it, even with a $4,000 or $5,000 rebate, are probably still fairly marginal for most people when they look at it on paper. So I think they've done about 110 or something batteries, battery rebate, sorry, in Victoria. And something similar is going on in South Australia as well. They've got a rebate scheme up to $6,000. And I don't think they've been taken up as fast as they thought they might have been. So yeah, if you are in one of those postcodes, you want to take advantage of the battery rebate. You can't get the solar and the battery rebate together. There are a few eligibility requirements you need to meet as well. So I want to talk a little bit about battery ready. What does that mean? There's a lot of companies out there that are marketing their solar systems as battery ready. You know, install a solar system that's ready to have battery storage put in. It's quite a flexible term, is what we've found, and it can mean a whole lot of different things. I put 4 different pictures up here, which could be all interpreted as battery ready. In the top left-hand corner here, there is a hybrid inverter, and that's probably the most common way that battery ready terminology is used. You can install a hybrid inverter which can accept solar and battery storage, and you might decide you want to have batteries at some point in the future, but I don't want to outlay the capital for it now. I'm just going to put in a hybrid inverter with some solar panels attached to it, and when the time comes, I'll add a battery to that hybrid inverter. It can be quite an economic way to go about it, but I guess there are some downfalls too that you need to be wary of, I suppose. One of them is that everything's moving really quickly in the battery world, and if you're thinking it might be 5 years or 3 years until you install a battery, you might find you install a system now expecting to put a particular type of battery in, and in 3 years' time, things have changed quite a lot, and maybe the preferred battery is something different that might not be compatible with the hybrid inverter, and you end up having to buy a battery inverter separately anyway. So that's one way that you could look at battery ready. The Electrotechnology systems that we install a few of, they pair with a solar inverter. So rather than having one inverter that does solar and batteries, you'd have a solar inverter and a battery inverter separately, and they're AC coupled together. So they call. So what happens is the DC power from the solar panels goes through to your solar inverter, is turned into 240 volts where it can be supplied directly to the home. If you don't use all of that electricity, anything that's left over to charge the batteries will go back through the battery inverter where it's turned back into DC and stored in the battery. So AC coupled systems are quite common, similar to Tesla. Tesla's got a battery and a battery inverter in that all in one case. In this case up here, you could say by installing a Electronic certified solar inverter that it's battery ready for a Electronic battery inverter, if you ever want to put one of those in, but it sort of, it ties you down to using, well, maybe it doesn't tie you down, but it's sort of assuming that that's the route you're going to go down. Some of you might have heard of N-phase microinverters. When you install N-phase microinverters, they've got this little gateway box that does a lot of the monitoring and management of the system. You could say that if you install N-phase microinverters, that this is the box that you need to add an N-phase battery. N-phase have a little AC battery that ties into this, so you could say that this is a battery-ready system just by having solar and the little management box, the Envoy. The other thing to consider if you're going to have a battery is the size of your solar array. I think in the past, a lot of people have, if you went back sort of 8 to 10 years ago, were putting in 1 kilowatt systems, and that's sort of gradually gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'd say probably the average that most people are installing today, probably 5 or 6 kilowatts or something like that. If you're putting in a Tesla Powerwall 2, they're about 13.5 kilowatt hours of storage. If you've got a 6 kilowatt system on your roof, you're probably going to find that there's going to be a shortfall in solar or excess solar available to charge the battery in winter on some days. So you might not be able to take full advantage of the Tesla battery. So night one, you discharge the battery, say you use all the capacity from it. The next day's a bit rainy and you only charge it up 50% or 30% because you're using a bit of power during the day and there's not much excess solar left over. And then it comes into night, you don't have the full capacity of the battery to take advantage of. So you could say that a battery-ready system is a system that's got enough solar to be able to charge up a battery to the size that you think you're going to need when you decide to put in a solar system, a battery system, should I say. So there are different ways to interpret battery ready. Something like the Tesla Powerwall 2 can come along to any old solar system pretty much and install this separate battery next to it. It's got its own battery inverter. You put some CT clamps over the solar and the consumption so it can see what's going on, and it'll just work. So yeah, just be a little bit wary about the terminology of battery ready. It can mean a whole range of different things. And I guess the thing to be careful of, if you're going to go down the path of putting a hybrid inverter in, I think they can be potentially quite good if you're looking to get a system at a lower cost and you want to integrate the solar and the batteries all into one unit. But if you're thinking about not putting batteries on for 5 years, maybe you might be better to look at a different option. So battery-ready hybrid inverters. So there's a few different inverters that I've put up here. Fronius have a 3-phase hybrid inverter, only suitable for sites that have 3-phase. Solar Edge, Solax, Redbat, Sungrow. All these ones on this side here are all hybrid inverters that are available on the market. We don't really do any hybrid inverters. We've played around with them a little bit in the past, but our preference probably is for most of our systems going down the AC coupled route where you have a separate battery inverter and a separate solar inverter. But it's not to say that some of these products might be suitable depending on what you're looking to achieve. On the other side here are some of the batteries. LG, BYD and Pylon-Tech are some of the common ones that can be paired up with some of these inverters. But I guess be aware, something like Solar Edge, I think that's only compatible with an LG battery. So if you install a solar edge inverter, thinking you're going to put a battery in later, you might be tied into using an LG battery in the future. Probably the other thing to think about, if you're grid connected and you're looking to put in a battery, is batteries can be used for a range of different things. Quite often when people are thinking about batteries, they're thinking about, let's capture the excess solar that would have been exported to the grid so we can use it at night and be more self-sufficient. But the other side of the coin is the backup capability. So if there's a blackout, which we're hearing a bit more about, and they're expected to see blackouts this summer, is what AEMO is telling us. You know, do you want your battery to be able to operate in a blackout? And not all battery inverters or not all batteries will be able to do that. So depending on whether this is high requirement for you, you might be in an area where you don't see blackouts, or you know, the longest blackout you've seen is an hour, and been the only one in the last 3 years, so it might not be a concern. But something like Enphase's AC battery, for example, that doesn't have any blackout protection. So if the grid goes down, so does your battery. You're not going to have any power. You go to the other end of the spectrum, something like the Electronic SP Pro, which is an off-grid inverter, has quite a high surge and power capacity, because when it's off-grid, it's got to be able to deal with pumps coming on and these really high power surges. So it can supply quite a lot of power in a blackout if it's used as a hybrid. And some of these other ones have a small amount of backup. I think Tesla has a 5 kilowatt backup. Sonnen is about 3.3 kilowatts if the grid goes down. And look, that might be suitable for some people. If you're just looking at wanting to run a fridge and have some lights and watch TV and charge your phone, you know, you'll probably be fine with some of these in this mid-range. But if you're wanting to back up your whole home in a blackout, be able to go on living life, you might want to go something bigger. So backup capacity is something that's worthwhile asking. If you've got critical loads, probably want to look at the UPS functionality as well. So uninterruptible power supply. So if the grid goes down, is everything going to turn off for 5 seconds while the battery synchronizes and kicks in? Or does it seamlessly click over? So different batteries will have different UPS capabilities. So probably something to consider if you're looking at putting in a battery. Yeah, so capacity. Yeah, both capacity and UPS functionality, I think, will add cost. Yeah, particularly capacity, something like the SP Pro. There's a lot of copper in that transformer to be able to deliver these high power surges. Yeah, they're quite heavy, and that can come with associated costs. Yeah, yep. I won't dwell on this slide too much. I was talking a bit about it before, but there's different ways that batteries can be used and different value streams. And I guess what we're seeing at the moment is the start of this battery revolution, I guess. And people are looking to increase their solar self-consumption by capturing that and using it at night. Backup power, I mentioned. Tariff arbitrage is where you would charge your battery at off-peak. So say from 11 till 7 overnight, we get a cheaper rate for electricity. You might decide to charge your battery up on off-peak. So in the morning when you get up and have your breakfast, you can discharge it and offset the peak rate. I'd probably say in Victoria, the differential between these two prices is pretty small. So whether it's actually worth doing, yeah. Yeah, I think I know in some places in New South Wales where people are paying like 50 cents or something for some of their peak rates, they might have lower sub 20 cent rates for off peak, and they have shorter rates in between. There might be some business case to say, well, let's cycle the battery using tariff arbitrage, charging off peak and discharging during peak. Yeah, so I think that there might be a business case there for it. But I guess if you look at a lot of the battery warranties, most of the batteries out there, a lot of the lithium stuff is 10-year warranty or a certain kilowatt hour throughput. So you've got to think, how valuable is me cycling this battery? I could potentially cycle it now to, you know, in Victoria, so we might have someone that's paying 17 cents for off-peak, and they're paying, 27 cents or something for peak rate. And there's only a 10-cent differential. You're only getting a benefit of 10 cents and you're cycling your battery. I'd probably say it's not worth it. You'd be better to save that battery cycling potential for offsetting, you know, charging with your solar and offsetting peak rate. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not too sure. We probably haven't done a lot. We're looking at a couple of jobs with Tesla power packs now, the big batteries that they use in South Australia. But I haven't had much experience with sizing there. But you know, you're probably talking about you're probably getting towards megawatt scale or something. I would think. Yeah. Yeah, we've done not so much in Grid-connect. You know, probably part of the question here when you're talking about commercial Grid-connect batteries, peak lopping or peak shaving is another area where you know, commercial customers are paying a peak rate for, you know, if they have machinery that draws a lot of current at a certain time, they might be pulling a couple of hundred kilowatts of power from the grid. That might only happen for a few minutes each month, but they get charged a high rate for that power capacity that needs to be there delivered from the grid. So you can put in a battery to shave off the peak. So rather than pulling that current from the grid, the battery takes up the slack, shaves off the peak in these spikes, and it keeps their costs down. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the economics of it now probably, certainly if you're just trying to use it for solar self-consumption, probably won't stack up. But if you can start to say, well, I'm going to use it for some daily cycling, and then we're also going to do some peak shaving, that's where we're maybe starting to see some niche scenarios start to stack up. But yeah, I'm not too sure about operating on the spot market. It's probably a bit above what we're yeah. Yeah. We've installed a couple of reposit systems, I think. So the way that they operate is they sort of aggregate lots of small batteries, and when the spot price of electricity goes really high, you know, they'll discharge the battery and pay the customer a higher price for that. For, you know, it might only be a handful of times a year that happens though. Yeah. Yeah, reposit operate in Victoria. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. 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 Yeah. Sorry, I'll repeat the question. Sorry, what was your name? Debbie. I was just saying that if she changes anything on her current solar system, like adding a battery, that or new solar, that would be detrimental for a contract with her existing retailer. So quite often, I think there's a scenario where people are on an old premium feed-in tariff where they're getting paid 60 cents or more for solar exports. Basically, if you make any adjustments to that system, you'll get relegated back onto the current feed-in tariff, which is more like 12 cents a kilowatt hour. So adding battery storage or adding solar will do that. So you've got to weigh up whether it's worth doing. It was quite a quite a good scheme for those that are still on it. I think that's still available out till 2024. So yeah, so I think if you're on a premium feed-in tariff, you know, the economics of putting battery storage in probably don't look that great. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it'll be just those on the premium feed-in tariff. Yeah. I'm not going to go too much into these. These are more grid scale stuff, ancillary services, demand response. You want to click onto the next page. What I have done is I've done a bit of an analysis of a 6.5 kilowatt solar system, which is fairly common these days with a Tesla Powerwall 2 battery, which is also fairly common. What I've done is I've put it into some of the software that we use, and I've overlaid it with usage data from PowerCore. It's actually the average consumption of residential home in PowerCore's region, which they cover off all of Western Victoria. Yep. It is, yeah. Yeah, I guess the reason why 6.5 kilowatts, 5 kilowatts is normally the max inverter capacity for solar for a lot of the distributors in Victoria. And if you want to claim SCEG rebates, you can oversize the array to about 1.33 times the inverter capacity. So that's why that's quite common. You put in a 5 kilowatt solar inverter, maybe 6.5 kilowatts of solar to maximize that. I know in PowerCore's region, if you go larger than that, you then need to start thinking about export limitations. So PowerCore would have let us put 10 kilowatts of solar in on a 10 kilowatt solar inverter as long as we don't export any more than 5 kilowatts to the grid at any one time. And there's just extra cost involved in putting a smart meter or something in to help manage that. So that's why that's quite a common size for single phase homes. In this scenario, I think there's about 21 kilowatt hours a day was the average in PowerCore's region. And we've also got the consumption curve. So basically it comes up in the morning, drops off during the middle of the day, and there's a big spike towards the end of the day when people come home from work. So it's sort of based on an average scenario. It's about 11, 12-year payback on the solar and batteries. And generally what you're going to find is that the solar payback might be somewhere around 5 years. The battery payback might be out at like 13, 14 years or somewhere. And the solar, when you combine it as an investment together, will drag down the payback period a little bit for the batteries. Normally around 10 years or something is where it's at. I think I looked at it, even with the Victorian rebate of about $4,800, it was down at just under 10 years or something. So that's probably where the economics are at the moment. And I guess the issue is if you're looking purely from an economic perspective, you want to put a battery in, it's got a 10-year warranty on it. If the payback on that battery is longer than 10 years, there is a chance that, you have a failure after 10 years, you still haven't recouped your outlay. But I mean, we are still seeing a lot of people putting batteries in. They're doing it for different reasons. Might be that they want the backup, or they're interested in the technology, or they like the philosophy behind where it's going, and they want to be more independent from the grid. So system, roughly 24 grand or something, I think I've got for a stand install there. And the savings per year, just under $2,000. So if you're going to go to the next page, there's some more information on what this looks like. Might be a little bit hard to see all those numbers, but probably one here that I think is important is 223 cycles per year. So what this program does is it overlays the solar production for that area over the consumption data, and it will give us a scenario that, what would have happened over the last 12 months if we had that battery in. So that Tesla battery is being cycled maybe 2 out of 3 days completely. So you could say that there's a case to put more solar on if you're wanting to utilise that battery more. There's going to be days in winter where the battery's not getting charged. There's probably also going to be days when you're not home at night, or you're not using all the power capacity in the battery. And I guess the theory is if you want to extract the most value out of the battery, you want to be cycling it as much as you can, getting as many cycles out of it during the warranty period, so that you can extract as much value from it. Go to the next slide. The economics of going off-grid are probably a little bit different. Is there anyone looking at off-grid systems here? Yeah, a couple. Yeah. Economics of off-grid tend to probably be a bit better, in my opinion. Most people are looking at offsetting infrastructure cost. So they might have to put power lines onto site, or they might have to upgrade a transformer. And you can look at using battery storage to, or setting up an off-grid system to basically offset that cost. And in a lot of cases, people might be in a better position from day one, going off-grid compared to spending the money on upgrading someone else's assets. The other scenario where off-grid can work quite well is in remote areas. If the people are running off diesel generators on tropical islands or outback Australia, for example, it's costing a lot of money to get diesel out to site. You can come in, put solar and battery storage, and reduce the amount of diesel that's being used. Can be quite cost effective. Some of you might be aware, there's a few forums on Facebook where people share some of the experiences that they've had. I find some of them are quite informative, actually, and trying to keep up to date with some of the experiences that other installers or other consumers are having with different products. There's really not a bad page to follow called Crap Solar, and people post up a lot of the crap solar pictures that they come across, and I think it's been quite good. They've been around for a few years now, and it's actually making people aware of some of the problems out there and understanding how they can do this better. So certainly as a resource for installers and designers, it's quite handy. I've included these two pics because this is a Victron battery inverter, which we use them on some of the small systems. And the other one's a Electrotechnology with an LG next to the car tyre down there, squeezed into a garage. I think the thing I want to emphasise is that you can get good quality equipment, but if it's installed by someone who's not up with what they're doing, and they rush it, you can still end up with a pretty subpar system. So I think probably one of the important things, if you're looking at putting in a battery storage system, make sure you're comfortable with the installer. If you can find a good installer or a company who install it for you, they're probably going to give you good advice around what products to use, and a lot of the things will flow on from there. So I thought I'd put together a bit of a list of some of the problems that we've come across, just to sort of give a bit of an overview of some of the things. Battery storage is still pretty new technology in this space. A lot of the products are only been on the market maybe a couple of years, and there's still a little bit of troubleshooting and tweaking of systems that needs to be done with some of these new technologies. And this is just a list of some of the issues that we've come across. And I guess going to your question before about the supercapacitors, I guess if we choose a product and we go out and install 100 batteries, and then 3 years later we find, oh, there's a problem with that battery, all of a sudden we might be fielding a lot of follow-up calls and having to deal with the problems that decision has made. So as a company, I think we're pretty careful about what we select, because we know, we're installing a lot of battery systems. If we install the wrong product, it could lead to a lot of headaches for both our customers, but for us as well. Like the nature of off-grid is that we're providing a lot of backup support for people when the grid goes, if their system goes down. It's a pretty critical scenario if you're off-grid and your system shuts down. You don't have power. It's a little bit different on grid. Some people that have a solar system and their system packs up, they might not realise for 3 months until they get their next electricity bill, because they've still got power coming from the grid. So I guess these are some of the things that we come up against, and this is part of what goes into thinking about, all right, which products are we going to use? And I think hopefully it gets you thinking as well. There are cheaper battery options out there. There's probably, I think, 30 or 40 new batteries on the market, and probably guarantee in 5 years' time, probably all those suppliers are probably not going to be still in Australia. So I think choose carefully and do some research. There's a lot of experiences online, and I guess you can talk to people at events like this, and Sustainable House Day and things like that can be good places where you can get feedback from others about the experience that they've had. There is also an independent battery test centre in Canberra who have been testing a lot of the common batteries. I can't remember the figure, but I think it was something like more than 50% of batteries, was 3% of something, batteries have had some sort of problem within their the first 18 months or something, or first couple of years of their testing regime. So whether that firmware upgrade problems or the battery failing or other things, they've listed the batteries that they've been testing and some of the things that they've come across. And I guess it's probably pretty reflective of the experience that we've had, I think, as well. But that's all online, so you can see information about how batteries degrade. They do what do you call it? It's sped up testing to test, cycling the battery quickly, so it replicates a 10-year period of operation. So they can see a lot of these batteries, for example, they have a 10-year warranty, and they'll state at the end of that 10-year period, or after X amount of kilowatt hour throughput, the battery should retain 60% of its original capacity, or 80% of its original capacity is around about the range that most of the lithium stuff is at. And I think some of the testing that they've done sort of reflects that that's where they would expect it to be, based on their cycle testing. Yeah. So system monitoring is probably an important part of a battery system. If you're able to get a good online connection for the monitoring system, and there's good app. This one's Victron's monitoring system. It's probably one of the better ones out there. And this is I think it might be an Offgrid system that we've got. So you can see here the red line is the consumption per day. I think that's saying like 10 kilowatt hours or something. The yellow is the solar production, and the blue line is the battery depth of discharge. So in this case, the batteries are really only discharging on average about 20%, the top 20% of the battery. I have a feeling this might be a lead acid system that we're looking at there. So yeah, you can drill down, you can see what's happening instantaneously, and if there's problems, it comes up with alerts and stuff like that. So if you're looking at getting solar or battery storage, ask about the monitoring system. Maybe ask us if you could see an example of it. So I thought I'd just show a few more pictures of some installations that we've done, just to give some examples. These are SMA Sunny Island systems. We used to do quite a few of these. They're similar to the Electrotechnology battery inverter. In this case, it was a larger containerized system with sealed gel lead acid batteries over here on battery racks. It was a sort of small microgrid for a farm that we did in New South Wales. This system's down near Geelong. This is another type of lithium battery that we did play around with for a little while. System's still going well, just a relatively small consumption. I think these are about 12 kilowatt hours altogether of storage, but it's working quite well for that lady. Three-phase systems are possible with Offgrid and batteries as well. In most of the cases at the moment, there's not many three-phase battery inverters available on the market. Fronius have one, but it has fairly limited capacity in backup mode, and certainly not an Offgrid inverter. So quite often what you're finding, if you're doing a three-phase or multi-phase system, you might be putting multiple battery inverters in, one on each phase in this case, and we've got 3 Fronius solar inverters, 1 per phase here, and a BYD battery bank along the bottom. So certainly, really anything's possible these days with battery storage from a technical perspective, as we can see with the larger commercial batteries that are starting to become available. It's really just a matter of cost. You can scale up to power big, huge houses if you need to, or commercial operations. It's just really the cost side of things that is the hurdle. That one there, yeah, that's the switchboard, the distribution board for the, yeah. So it's got all the AC loads for the house. Yep. Most of the battery system, yeah, it's quite a big lead acid battery bank, this one. Most of the battery systems that we deal with are 48 volt batteries and battery inverters. In the case of Cell Electronic, they make a 120 volt battery inverter, which is this big guy over here. And what it means is that you need a 120 volt battery bank. So each of these lead acid batteries are 2 volt cells. So you have 60 batteries in a 120 volt system. And in this case, he's got 2 banks, so in parallel. So he's got, what's that, 120 2 volt batteries. So it's quite a large hybrid system. I think the customer originally had 3 solar inverters in here, the blue ones, and he's added more solar capacity when he put the battery system in. Victron is another product that we use a bit of. Rather than the AC coupling that I described before, most of the Victron stuff that we do is DC coupled. So what that means is rather than the solar coming off the roof and going into an inverter and getting turned into 240 volts AC, which is what your appliances can use, what happens is that the charge controller turns it into DC and it goes into the DC bus where it will charge the battery, or goes through the battery inverter and is delivered to the house. So it's a little bit of a different way to set up systems. Probably if you went back 10 or 15 years ago, most of the systems were set up like this. The AC coupling is something that's a little bit newer. Yeah, we use the Victron for smaller off-grid systems mainly. They're a little bit more cost-effective than an electronic. In this case, we've paired it with that BYD battery as well. The question was, what do I call small in terms of off-grid? I would say most of the systems we do when we're talking about off-grid systems probably start around $20,000. There is probably a segment of the market there in the caravanning, tiny home that might be, you know, sub $20,000 systems. It's probably not an area that we play in, but I would say anything from, like, a small system like this might be 5 kilowatt hour consumption per day. So someone using 5 kilowatt hours a day. You know, anywhere between maybe 3 and 10 kilowatt hours would be a smaller system, I would say. And that's your consumption, your daily consumption. Yeah. Yeah.
Why has the change been from DC coupled systems to AC coupled systems for charging the battery?
So I guess one of the benefits of AC coupling, when you've got DC coupled system, you've got one inverter. This Victron inverter here might be 5 kilowatt, half an hour output, for example. With AC coupling, one of the benefits is you'll have the battery inverter, which might say it's the same, it's 5 kilowatts. But you might also have 6 kilowatt solar inverter there. So during the day, you're getting the solar and battery layering on top of each other. So you've got more potential. So if you wanted to run a heat pump hot water system and you've got a pool, you've got pool pumps, you've got high energy requirements during the day that exceed that of the battery inverter, there's a bit more power available because you can layer that over the top. So that's one of the benefits of AC coupling. Yeah.
In our previous house that we've just sold, we actually had a combination of AC coupled and DC coupled. We're using microinverters because of shading issues. But the main array was actually fed via a charge controller using a charge controller into an SP Pro, and we found that with the combination of systems that the DC coupled and the AC coupled both contributed to the export.
Yeah.
which the supplier at the time was a little bit surprised at.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
But it worked beautifully.
Yeah. Yeah. We actually installed a system a few weeks ago, similar to what you're saying. So with DC coupled and AC coupled solar. The reason they can be quite a good way to set up the system, where the DC is really giving you more efficient battery charging because you're not having to convert it to DC and then back to DC. And then the AC coupled is supplying directly to the loads in the house that are being used during the day. So there's efficiencies there. The reason we did it on a recent job is it was in AusNet's area, and AusNet have a 10 kilowatt inverter cap and for single phase customers. And the problem we had, this particular customer, she wanted more solar. We installed a 5 kilowatt SP Pro, and we had a 5 kilowatt Fronius inverter, but she was wanting more than 10 kilowatts of solar. And we worked through with AusNet, and they wouldn't allow us to put any more than a 5 kilowatt solar inverter with the 5 kilowatt battery inverter. So we DC coupled some additional solar in to get around that requirement or restriction from the grid distributor. So yeah, it's quite interesting if you can get the system set up and working. Yeah, certainly a good setup to look at both. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, go one.
You find that the electricity suppliers are a pain in the neck or try to be helpful?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, I found my dealings with the distributors to be pretty good. Powercore, I'm based down near Geelong, so a lot of our clients are on the western side of Victoria, and they're really pretty flexible with what they'll allow you to connect. Powercore will pretty much say you can install pretty much anything on a single phase system as long as it's 5 kilowatt export limited. So you can put 10 or 15 kilowatt solar inverter in as long as you export limit it. Their approach to batteries is pretty much they'll approve nearly all scenarios for battery storage in Powercore's regions. AusNet's a little bit different. They're a little bit more restrictive. But I've been talking to one of their guys and I'm talking through some of the issues that they're coming up against, trying to manage the quality of the power that they're supplying from the grid. Because some of you might have heard, with all the solar that's going in, people are exporting back into the grid. It's pushing up voltages and causing problems in some places. The higher the penetration of solar, the more issues you have. And I think you'll find in Queensland, certainly a lot of the commercial installations will be zero export because they've got a higher penetration of solar. They get a lot of sun up there, and there's a lot of export potential going into the grid, which is playing problems because they've got quite a spread out, sparse network up there too.
Queensland, who found his solar system wasn't exporting much to the grid, and it turned out it was because the grid was operating quite often at a point where his solar thing couldn't push any into the grid because the grid volume was already too high.
Yeah, we've seen that a little bit. If the solar is exporting into the grid and there's high voltage on the network, what you can see is that the voltage gets pushed up so high that it goes out the top of the inverter window where the inverter operates in. Basically, the solar inverter turns off, the voltage drops back down, and then about a minute later, the solar inverter turns back on and the solar starts ramping up, the voltage goes back up, and then it goes out of range again, turns back off again. And you get this situation where the solar inverter, it's a not bright sunny day, and the solar inverter is cycling on and off and not generating any electricity. And I guess that's a scenario where battery storage could potentially help rather than the battery trying to export to the grid and pushing the voltage up. Having a battery there would soak up some of that excess solar and maybe help to alleviate the problem. But really, the solar companies that are installing your system should be doing voltage drop calculations now, making sure that all the wiring is sized correctly to avoid some of these issues. And I guess that's part of the reason why in some rural areas in Victoria, you might find that you apply for a 5 kilowatt system and they might come back and say, oh no, you can't, we've got too much solar here. We only want to put, we're only going to allow you to put 2 kilowatts in, or we're not going to allow you any export, which we have seen a little bit of. And that voltage issue is probably one of the big issues that they're coming across. Yeah, but there are other things that they're having to manage. So yeah, I think there are valid reasons why some of these distributors are you know, trying to put in place some rules so that they can manage their infrastructure and manage the quality of power, because high voltage can cause problems with appliances and end up damaging appliances. So yeah.
Smart meter,
Yeah.
and you should also go back to the distributor.
Yes.
So the power is too high.
Yeah.
You can adjust the transformer.
Yeah.
A lot of people are doing that.
Yeah, we did that. We put a 100 kilowatt system on a school down in Geelong recently with a little bit of battery storage. And we noticed the voltage on one of the phases was quite high to start with no solar there. And even though it wasn't causing a problem, and we thought, well, let's get onto this before it does. Contacted Powercore, said we think there's a problem here with high voltage. They were out within the week, tapped the transformer down, and solved that issue. So they're pretty responsive to this sort of stuff. Yeah, which is good.
Aaron, I was just wondering what voltage is too high.
I think 256 is around about where some of the settings are. I think they've got different voltage settings in the inverter for different periods. So if it goes up to 256 or something for a short period, it will click out. Or if it's sustained at 253 for a longer period, it might trigger the inverter to drop out. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, like Fronius will ramp down capacity. So the more solar trying to be exported into grid, it's pushing the voltage up. So one of the things that some of the inverters will do is say, well, we could be generating 5 kilowatts of electricity right now, but because of the voltage, we're ramping down 3 kilowatts to manage the voltage, so it's not going to trip the inverter out. Yeah, so there's smarter responses being built into some of the products to deal with some of these issues. On some off-grid systems, we put in portable generators. This is an example of a portable generator. Most of the time, we're recommending for off-grid customers to get a good quality diesel unit from a brand name supplier. Most of them, we're recommending get a sound attenuated weatherproof canopy. But you know, something like that, quite often you're looking at $10,000 for a good diesel generator. Something like this, I think, was more like $6,000 or $5,000. Needs to be in a lockable enclosure though, ventilated, you know, protected a bit from the weather. But that's set up with an auto start, that one. It's been fitted to a portable style generator, so that is possible. Yep. That's an off-grid system. There might actually be an article coming up in Renew about this house. I was talking to the architect the other day, and he was writing something up. But this is an off-grid system we did. The customer arranged to have the pitch of the roof pitched up to about 30 degrees, so we didn't have to have the panels on tilt frames, optimizing for winter. And they've got a lead acid battery bank around the corner in a little room in their garage. Yep. Oh, this is it here. Yeah, so this is the battery bank. Had a few customers doing this. We normally recommend a dedicated room for battery equipment if it's possible, particularly if you're building a house. If you can contain it, separate it from everything else that's going on, that's great. You might have noticed in a couple of the other shots there were bollards up. So there is a requirement. If you're going to put batteries in a garage or something, there may be a requirement to put in bollards to protect it, mechanically protect them from something like a car or a trailer rolling into them. Yep. Yeah, so it needs ventilation. It's definitely a requirement for lead acid batteries. So normally we'd recommend Whirlybird on the roof, and behind the batteries along here, I think the customer's got like 4 or 5 vents down low. So we'll normally specify, there's a calculation that you do based on the battery capacity that tells you the size of the ventilation that's required. But generally our recommendation, lithium lead acid batteries, most batteries, they don't like big temperature fluctuations. They don't like really hot conditions. They don't like really cold conditions. So anything you can do, you know, on a concrete slab with lead acid, you really need to isolate it from the slab, but the slab will help to maintain the constant temperature in the battery room. If you can insulate it, ventilate it, normally we'd locate it in the south side, southeast corner of a shed or something. If it's going inside a shed, stay away from those north or west walls that tend to get a lot of heat. We've had a few customers doing these slimline type setups with a roller door. They can put on the side of a garage or along the side wall of a shed or something, and it keeps it fairly space efficient, and they can still get in and access everything.
Concrete, and I've never heard anyone explain to me what the reason is.
Yeah.
If it is a valid thing to say.
Yeah, so certainly with lead acid batteries, they recommend not having the battery sitting on concrete directly. Normally you would sit them on some wood, or we use that product, it's called Zedcell. I think the reasoning is if the battery's sitting on concrete, there's a big temperature differential at the bottom of the battery to the top of the battery, and it can cause, I don't know exactly the issue they're looking at, but that temperature differential can cause the battery to degrade quite quickly. Yeah.
And if you lower the temperature of the battery, the chemical reactions slow down, so you don't get quite as much capacity out of the battery.
That's right. Yeah, lead acid, you'll certainly lose capacity. Yes. Yep. Yeah, so it's like the capacity of your battery shrinks with cold temperature. Hot temperature with lead acid is probably going to shorten the life cycle of the battery. The other thing, when you're looking at lithium batteries, they're like a lot of the LFP lithiums, like BYD, and the other brand that we use is Power Plus, which is a Australian-made battery they manufacture in Melbourne. Generally, as you get down towards 0 degrees in temperature, the charge rate of the battery drops right off. You can damage the battery if you're trying to charge it too quickly as it approaches 0 or goes below 0. So what happens is that you might have a scenario where it's the start of the day, it's very cold, central Victoria or something, and your solar's coming up, and you've got 5 kilowatts of solar pretty quickly early in the morning. You might find that solar, the battery might not be able to take all of that solar if the temperature's too low with some of the lithium batteries. So it's probably one thing to be aware of, that the charge rate will be ramped down in cold conditions. It's another generator pick. This is another system that generator pick. This is another three-phase system that we've done using the Simplify batteries, which are a Californian, like a smart battery, similar to the Power Plus battery I mentioned before, which is the Australian made battery that we've been using. The benefit of Simplify and of Power Plus is they have the battery management system built into each of the batteries. So I guess we call them a smart lithium battery. With BYD, the other one that I've been showing you, it has a battery management system that looks after the whole battery bank. So I guess there's pros and cons, but you could say if you've got a BMS, battery management system, looking after the whole bank, it's a potential single point of failure where you could lose the whole battery capacity, whereas Simplify, Power Plus, they've each got a BMS inside each battery, and if that was to fail, you only lose one of the modules rather than the whole lot. But yeah, you certainly do pay a higher price for the smart lithium technology. This is one of the Redflow Zedcell systems that we installed up in Queensland. These each of these battery modules are about 300 kilos. So they're quite big and heavy and bulky. That one's an off-grid system that we set up. It's probably one of the larger residential Zedcell systems in Australia, I'd say. Most of the systems out there are probably 1 or 2 batteries, but yeah, I think something like that, you're heading towards a couple of $100,000. It's getting quite expensive yeah, to set up a system like that. Ground mount solar, we do a fair bit. Doing a lot of off-grid jobs. We do a bit of ground mount solar. Yeah. With the Zedcell, they are 10 kilowatt hours per battery. So that's a 60 kilowatt hour system. And they have a max output of about 3.3 kilowatts, I think, in terms of the power they can dispatch. So you might find in an off-grid scenario, if you've got an electric oven, for example, and other appliances, you might find that one of those batteries is not going to have enough power to deliver that instantaneous power, that you need to have 2 or 3 or more of them to be able to get that power rating up. Yeah. Yeah, so I guess the nature of a lot of off-grid jobs that we do, they tend to be on acreage, and people, you know, have a bit of space. If you don't have an appropriate spot to put panels on a roof, like a shed or the house, you can ground mount them. A bit more expensive, but certainly an option. That's one of the large containerized systems that we did. It's got about 70 kilowatts of solar, batteries, battery inverters, generator enclosed in the container there, with the solar inverters on the outside here. So that was a microgrid system we did up in New South Wales. That's the interior of the system. So I think each one of these battery inverters got about 8 kilowatt half an hour rating on them. There was 18 of them, I think. So it's about 140 kilowatts or something of power, half an hour rating that can be delivered from the batteries to the loads on that property. Yep. This is one of our little energy box designs. In this case, this is a gen-free system. We don't normally recommend putting off-grid systems in without generators, but in this case, it was an unmanned site. It wasn't possible to have a generator there. Really, you just got to oversize the solar, and you've got to make sure the battery capacity is large enough to get you through the worst case scenario. You know, really, that's around shortest day of the year, give or take a month or so. Probably tends to be the critical time when generators tend to get used. Yeah, so that's all enclosed with batteries and battery inverter and everything inside that box. What's that? Sorry? Tracking. Yeah, there are trackers out there, and certainly a lot of the megawatt scale projects. I know Deakin, my brother-in-law is actually in some project management down there, and they're putting in a multi-megawatt ground mount system, which is all next tracker tracking devices. So I think certainly in the megawatt scale projects, there's certainly a bit of a lean back towards using trackers. At a residential level, we don't really use them. I guess the cost of solar has come down quite a lot. Our view has been, you know, you can add more solar panels pretty cheaply now to increase the output rather than bringing in another mechanical device. Yep. 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 Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if roof mounted stuff, maybe ground mount. I've seen a couple of options. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not aware of any sort of commercially available stuff. That most of the racking manufacturers now, there's sort of standardized solar module hardware or racking hardware that you purchase, and it comes with an engineering certificate for wind loading and all that sort of stuff. And as long as you install it as per their specs, you know, it's got the engineering certificate. I'm not familiar with anything on the market. There's probably some products out there if you had to have a look, and there's probably some niche scenarios where it probably makes sense, like what you talk about.
You can rotate, if you can rotate 3 groups of 3 or 4 panels in a circle, they're not going to take up any less space when you've got a meter on either side of it. So,
yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you got any south-facing roof?
Yep.
Yeah, I'd go south. Use up north if you can, west, east, even south facing, flat mounted.
Got them all over it.
Just put them everywhere. Yeah, I think there's quite a reasonable business case now. If you got to work with what you've got on the site, and I don't see any problem with putting south facing modules up. We actually put an Offgrid system in recently, which I was cringing about a little bit with south facing modules. But we had to go from 30 kilowatts to 50 kilowatts to make up the capacity in winter, really.
With batteries too, and again, tariff rate, different tariff rates. So,
yeah,
generating more energy in the afternoons can be more valuable than generating it during the day.
Yeah. I'm probably still in the camp that says north facing is going to be better than west, but I can see the argument there in circumstances if you're using more power in the afternoon, where a lot of people do. What you'll find though, when you look at solar production, particularly in the winter, when the sun's low in the sky, the east-west arrays, that's when they lose out a little bit. Maybe a bit better in summer when the sun's going overhead like that. But I think you got to work with what you've got. I think any of those array orientations will work. As long as it's not too steep. If you start going east-west and it's 45-degree pitch roof and south facing at 45 degrees, if it's fairly flat still, 20-degree pitch, it should be fine. This one's the interior of that one of those energy boxes that we've done. So we've got battery inverter. This is the charge controller here. We've got the battery fusing here. The batteries are in the next compartment in the back. These are the solar isolators here that are coming into the charge controller. This is a little monitoring device. This is a DC to DC converter. Inside the box we had some lights running off 12 volt DC. So this is taking the 48 volt from the battery and dropping it down to 12 volts. Had some little fans in there as well. We've got a generator plug here and internet connection. So we do a lot of prefab in our workshop. So when we send out to site, the systems come together a bit better. And a lot of these off-grid sites are remote. It just it saves a lot of time and mucking around. And if you get out somewhere that's 3 hours drive from the nearest wholesaler, you've got a little bit of equipment that you need. The more we can do prefabricating, the better quality control we've got over it, and it just makes things run smoother. Less time on site doing installation. So that's a lot of our off-grid systems. We do prefab boards like this. Yep, you can see the similar sort of thing here. We prefabricate those boards, but mount the inverters on them, wire up the fusing and isolation, everything, program them, turn them on, test them before they go out to site. It's another hybrid system. This is another one we did about 12 months ago. When Teslas were in a short supply, we had one customer that had a grant and was keen to use them. In this case, we used this is a new Sunny Boy storage with a high voltage BYD. So these batteries aren't running at 48 volts; they're running at a much higher voltage. I think it's up around 400 volts. So that's there is a solar inverter on another building in this case, and it's AC coupled with the battery inverter there, and all set up on a monitoring portal. So Tesla recently updated their product, and this is one that we did recently with the new gateway. Some of you might have, if you're familiar with Tesla, they had this nice looking battery, and then they had this ugly grey box, which was the gateway, which ended up getting put on the wall somewhere. So they've upgraded it and made a little mini-me of the battery. So that's the Tesla with the new Gateway 2 and a couple of solar inverters there. This is a three-phase hybrid system we did with the Power Plus batteries. So the Power Plus are the Australian-made ones that we've been using, manufactured in Melbourne. Electrotechnology battery inverters also manufactured in Melbourne, and the Fronius solar inverters there. yeah, some of these three-phase systems, something like that, you're probably getting up towards $150,000, $200,000 for a setup like that. I would imagine there's probably about, I'm not sure about the solar array size, but I think it might be about 30 kilowatts or something on the roof. I just thought I'd share with you some of the resources too that I use to reflect on where things are going in the industry. There's can't really read books these days about solar because they tend to be outdated within about 3 months or something. Everything's moving so quickly. So I guess Solar Quote, Solar Choice, a lot of these podcasts or websites I find useful for keeping your finger on the pulse, including the ATA and Renew magazine, which I find is a great resource for hearing what other people are doing out there, and whether it's to do with energy efficiency or batteries or solar or electric vehicles. I find that's a great resource. I think that's pretty much all I've got. I'm happy to take questions, and I'm happy to hang around and have a chat. I don't know what time we're looking at. 8:30.